Hello and welcome back. In the last video, I showed you how to take down a Smith Wesson Model 27, or in my case, it's a 27-2. And, I'm going to show you how to piece it back together. Hopefully you do stick around and, maybe learn something. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start out at the very bottom and work our way up. Or go in the reverse order that we took them all out. First thing, take your long, thin spring, stick it in the back. Come into the back of your firearm. Press it in. Let it ride home. And you immediately flip it over. Immediately flip it over. And put your screw back in. Don't mind me. My mind is lost today. Just put it back in. I mean, you don't have to go like super duper tight. Set it in. And then what you're going to want to do is you're just going to want to play with it. You're going to want to make sure it is still fairly loose. You don't want it too tight, only for the reason why, because then you won't be able to use it. Sorry, I'm just setting the tightness to how I like it. Okay. Now, if you remember in part 1, you remember this little piece. Well, in front of your weapon, it has a little hole. And what you're going to have to do is just set it in, play with it for a little bit. And the spring should set right in. Okay. Spring went in its home. That is locked up. That's what you want to see. You want to see your lockup bar in the correct position. Next thing you're going to want to do is take your hammer. Now, as you can see, everything was oiled up. So I took care of a lot of steps ahead of time. Now, in your hammer, you've got this little black bar. That's got to stay on the outside. Okay. And what you're going to have to do is, again, just walk it in. Don't have to use force. Because, honestly, you don't really need it. Okay. Now that your hammer is walked in, I'm just going to apply just a tad right at the beginning, right where it does rub. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm doing a ghetto trigger job. Next thing. Take your really heavy duty spring, and you'll notice which one it is. You know, it's short and it's thick. Take it, pop that right in, pop your little bar. Put your flat side down. And what you're going to want to do is take your screwdriver, either a screwdriver or a punch, you know, either one of them is good. And you're going to have to compress that spring. Set it in. And I always give it a couple whacks with a hammer or a really soft screwdriver. Sorry, dropped one of the screws. So you can actually see how it's set in now. I mean, it's fairly easy. I mean, it's going to take a little bit of persuasion, I'll say. Next, your hammer. You're not really going to go far without this, are you? No. Didn't think so. So, what you're going to have to do, they'll try to keep it in frame. Next, just take your hammer, and it's got its home right in the front. But as you can see, it ain't in its home. So unfortunately this process does take a little bit of, I'm not going to say persuasion or something like that. It takes a little bit of, you know, just trying to figure it out. I mean, you're going to know it's there. Once it's in there. Okay. Now what you could do is pull the trigger, and I'll show you roughly what I always do. I pull the trigger, so that this way it's about halfway there. I set the hammer in. Yeah, I set the hammer in, I push it in, and just to test, that hammer's all the way back. It's got no push off. Pull the trigger a little bit more and it drops. That's roughly what you're looking for. You're looking for something very sweet, something very smooth. Next, I'm going to start my mainspring screw. I'm going to just start it. I'm not going to let it go in and touch any of the parts yet. Okay. After you got your mainspring set, and that's how it's supposed to be set, you can see how flat it is. I'm not going to tell you to just crank it up all the way, because honestly, this takes a certain touch. But all I'm doing is just turning this screw. I mean, you could adjust this, but honestly, the more tension you put on there, the quicker this hammer is going to drop. Yeah, it's just a rule of thumb. So let's get on to the next step. Next step, this little bar that sits in, and you're going to have to basically just find its sweet spot. It rides in one place. You can see the groove right on your plate. That's where it rides. And your plate, the top of the plate goes in first. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set in this back screw. I'm going to set in the middle screw. Because remember, until that cylinder is put on, that front screw means nothing. Now you could see I mean, I'm doing all the screw work with, just a small flathead. Yeah, this is a Durablast. It's a 1/8 screwdriver. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to move my laptop real quick. Facebook's up. Don't really pay attention to that too much while I'm working on it, or working on a weapon. That's like sex right there. That's like wild sex in a mouth. No, I'm playing. Smoking's bad for your health. You shouldn't smoke. Okay. Let's get on to this cylinder. Okay, as always, this piece goes in first, and this actually sits right in a notch. And rule of thumb, apply a little bit of grease or oil right into that groove. It's going to help everything just ride a little bit easier. Working in a little bit. Okay. Next, take your rod. Now, notice on your rod how there's a little notch. That notch goes right in first. Your spring. Now you can see how quickly everything is coming together. I mean, again, I say, it's not like it's really rocket science. It's, just simple. You place your big spring on first. You pop your top. Take your little spring, put that over. And spin it towards you. I've actually got a new one of these on order, so I'm not too worried. But to check function, so we know it works. Next, what you're going to do Just install it. You know, it's simple. That spins in. Always index it to make sure it's locked. Then normally what I do is I always take this first screw, I apply a little bit of grease or oil right up to the front, working in with my thumb just a little, or working in with one of my fingers right on the edge. It's just going to provide a little bit easier surface for it to ride on. Set that in. And what I'm doing now is I'm just setting the tension of the screw. Next, what you're going to want to do is before you even put on your grips, is you're going to want to test function of the weapon. You know, watch the cylinder on every time you pull this trigger. See how it locked up? No movement. Pull it. Next. Now you don't want to do it that fast, but so we know double action works. Now the more important, single action. You push up on the hammer after it's locked back. If it doesn't move, you have no hammer push off. Next, check to make sure your wheel does not turn or your cylinder. And again, do this on every cylinder. That's 6. I might have miscounted one, but next is your grips. After you put on your grips, it's done. And I'm just gonna do it like this, only for the reason why it's a little bit easier for me. A little bit more natural. We already know it's empty, so I'm not gonna have to safety check it. Take your screw, screw your grips on. Don't screw it on too tight. And after that, guess what? You have a fully working weapon. Doesn't that just look pretty? Actually, you know what? You know what would make it prettier? Ooh. I know, you can't really see these. So let me put them in a light. Oh, you should be able to read that box right about now. Yeah. Spear Gold Dot. 158 grain. Now, what would make this weapon even prettier? Wow. Simply put, This is what would make it prettier. 6 spear gold dots. That is what's going to make a pretty weapon. Let me zoom in so you can see the love inside the cylinders. Now, would you want to have that looking at you? I didn't think so. So I'm going to leave you with one parting note. If you don't belong in somebody's house, you might end up seeing this coming right at you. Have a nice day.